So today, welcome to this, the third of our seminar in the series of celebrating Asian legal careers. Before we start, let me acknowledge country. I'd like to acknowledge that we're on the unceded lands of the Myuran and the Wurundjeri people of the Kulin Nations, and pay respects to their elders, past, present, and emerging, and to express our gratitude for them that we're here as uninvited guests on their land. So today we are really fortunate in this series to have Joel Backwell here, and Joel is going to talk to us about his particular path and his career. He's now Executive Director of the Office for Suburban Development in the Department of Jobs, Precincts and Regions in the Victorian government. And he previously worked in a range of public and private sector roles, including as Head of Transport and Economic Policy Teams in the Department of Premier and Cabinet, Executive Director of International Education in the Department of Education and Training. He was the Trade Commissioner for Malaysia and Brunei between 2013 and 15, lucky you. Although I'm sure it was a very important and difficult, stressful job, based in the High Commission in Kuala Lumpur. But he started his career as a projects lawyer with Herbert Smith Freehills, was part of the pro bono team, legal team that was defending Myuran Sukumaran and Andrew Chan, who were members of the Bali Nine, who were facing the death penalty in Indonesia and ultimately was inflicted on them. He has an arts honours, law honours degree from Monash University, grad dip in applied finance, and you can see that he is a man of many talents and vast experience in a whole range of areas. He speaks Indonesian and serviceable Spanish, studied German, Arabic and Italian. Man. So if you wouldn't mind speaking in English just for today, that would be really good. So, but look, so thank you for coming. I think it's going to be a fabulous and interesting talk. So please let me invite Joel to tell you about his career.
Thank you very much, and really appreciate the opportunity. So I've been told that a lot of people are likely to watch this after the fact. We're recording the session. So for those of you who aren't in the room, I'm extremely socially distant from the people that are sitting at the back of the room who are here in person. And I will talk for a bit about my life and career, but then hoping to have some questions from those who are here to be able to bounce off and fill in some of the gaps. So I'd also like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the lands that we're meeting on today, but also from wherever those people are who might be listening into this after the fact, and to pay my respects to their elders past, present and emerging. I am currently the Executive Director of the Office for Suburban Development, and without going into that too much, because it's not really the subject of today's presentation, I'm effectively responsible, or me and my team are responsible for supporting the recovery and revitalisation of metropolitan Melbourne through a place-based lens, particularly but not only off the back of COVID, climate change, Industry 4.0, hybrid working, all of these sort of mega changes to the way that people want to live and work their lives. Is going to have a huge impact on the shape of the city, not just the CBD, what people need from government in terms of services, but also how they're going to interact with each other. But being a place-based role, I'm sort of keenly aware every single day in that role about the importance of place and everything that we have to learn from those who have been here for tens of thousands of years. And it's a really exciting part of the job to start to think about place itself as a stakeholder in those discussions, and the sort of segue into climate change and sustainability. It's a really exciting time to be Victorian and to be a public servant if we think about the momentum that's building around the Uluru Statement from the heart, and the leadership that Victoria is showing in this space around the First Peoples Assembly and Aboriginal economic prosperity and self-determination, which is a really big priority for my department in particular, the Department of Jobs, Precincts and Regions. So I did do arts law at Monash University, but I don't feel like I'm sort of on enemy territory here. My wife did her law degree at Melbourne University, and part of the reason that I've been invited here is because I am involved with one of the university's advisory boards, but I've also previously been part of the AEF advisory board as well, the Asia Education Foundation, and I'm an alumnus of the Asia Link Leaders Program. And I'll get to that later, because even though it might sound in a role like Office for Suburban Development that I'm about as far from both law and Asia as you can be, as I'll go into later, it's actually a bit of a sort of culmination of everything that I've done to date, sort of rolled up into one. As I said, that place-based role means that you get to engage with a whole lot of different people, a whole lot of different sectors, and in particular, you get to really understand one of, I think, our state's greatest assets, which, apart from our rich Aboriginal history and current day culture, is our multiculturalism. And it really has made this city and this state, it shaped everything about it, the things you can see and the things that you can't see. And I guess the way I go about my job is informed by a lot of the experience that I've had and been really privileged to have in engaging with the big wide world. So I'm not planning to sort of give a lecture or a seminar on Asian law or the death penalty or place-based economic development. I'm really wanting to just have a conversation using my own career and personal experience. Available to people who are coming into their studies, particularly those who are starting or partway through or even recently finished a law degree. So for me, it's been a very eclectic career to date. I might just pause 1 second. That's all right.
Turn you to hell.
The joys of hybrid existence. As we all know, I can adapt here if I need to. I can go and sit somewhere else, but we'll just give it a second, because otherwise it's strange to hear a bodiless voice echoing through the room. Do you want to switch around? So for those who are watching, and this is still recording, we'll see if they can cut and dice it later. Quite fascinating, I think. All right. That's right.
We're doing exactly what you said. So we were in person, and then we were remote, and then we were hybrid, and now we're on the wall. Now we're on the wall.
So picking up where I left off, I really just wanted to use, as I mentioned before, my very much eclectic career as not an example, but really multiple examples within one career around some of the paths that I think are available to people sort of entering the workforce or at a juncture in their career, or just started their degree. So I have sort of straight off the bat come to realise over time how lucky I am. I turned 40 recently, good opportunity for reflection, but just I guess how lucky and how fortunate, how privileged I am, because a lot of the examples that I'll talk about, like I've only been able to take them up because I was born here in Australia. My parents were teachers, instilled in me a real love of learning and gave me a lot of opportunities to travel with them and independently. didn't have to worry about financial security other than one period in Indonesia that I'll get to later. You know, and had friends and mentors and family around me the whole way. So in going through this presentation, I am just wanted to highlight that I'm really conscious that not everyone has the sort of safety net and the opportunity to just keep switching career all the time, even if it means taking a salary cut or having to deal with uncertainty. So I have been really lucky. So I guess a couple of the key lessons before I dive in. One is my very, very strong view, and it's really good to see the federal government paying some attention to this, is that a law degree is a really good degree. It's almost a generalist degree these days, but a law degree with a language is a key to a rich and a varied career. But if that's your tool for your career path, don't expect a linear path, in my experience. The second is Australia is very much a part of Asia. We are located in Asia. We are economically linked to Asia. We are increasingly linked to Asia through our multiculturalism, through our international students. And that's something to be really excited about, not fearful of. And third is, and this is another bit of a theme for my career, is that diversity of thinking is critical for innovation, ingenuity, solving complexity, facing some of those big challenges of our time, like combating climate change. And so we need to find ways to think outside the square, think differently. And part of that for me has been learning other languages and living in other places has really expanded my worldview and given me the tools to think about problems and opportunities from different angles. But the other part to that is also making sure that we're actively trying to put together diverse teams to solve that complexity of problems. And it's one of the challenges that I think we have in the public service at the moment is just statistically, it's clear that the people who work in the public service aren't necessarily representative of the diversity of the community that we're here to represent. So my early years, as was in the title for this, was growing up in a very, very small place called Breamlea. It's down the coast, not too far from Bells Beach, just across between Torquay and Bowen Heads, for anyone who's familiar with that part of the world. Breamlea's got a population of a few hundred people. So it was a very sort of caring and supportive environment I grew up in, but it was very sheltered, very closed, not much diversity. You know, there might have been a couple of people in the whole town who spoke a language other than English at home, but it was a wonderfully supportive but extremely monocultural childhood. And then even when I went on to primary school and secondary school down in Geelong, very similar, like very sort of Anglo monocultural surrounds, peer groups and interactions. And Geelong's come a long way in the last 40 years. And, you know, you can get some amazing diversity of experience down there now, but not when I was growing up. So for me, the tipping point, the turning point, the sliding doors moment was year 8 Indonesian. And I was really lucky to have a very wonderful and inspiring year 8 Indonesian teacher, and then lucky all through high school to have subsequent Indonesian teachers who they had lived in Indonesia, they really understood Indonesia, they weren't just teaching from the textbook. And they really helped me understand that it was more than just another subject, that it was really sort of a window into this big wide world that I hadn't experienced growing up. So the first overseas trip I ever did was to Bandung, Indonesia in year 10. So I was really lucky, my parents being teachers, we got to travel a lot around Australia. But that was my first overseas trip and it was life defining. It was an exchange program run by the Victorian Education Department. There was a small handful of us. We lived in a host family. So I was living by myself with a host family in Bandung. Muslim family, I got there during Ramadan. So the sort of juxtaposition of being this, country kid from this very supportive but not particularly diverse upbringing, suddenly landing in Bandung with a host family during Ramadan, woken up at 4:30 in the morning for breakfast, and that's your meal for the day, or at least till the sun goes down. As far as formative experiences go, that was about as significant as you get. So that really planted the seed for me for everything I've really done ever since. Subject choices I made at university, career choices, the jobs I applied for, they all came from that experience over a 3-month period living in Bandung and really living, not doing any tourist things, going to the local school and just building these lifelong friendships. And I'm still very much in touch with that host family. But it also really taught humility and sort of seeing things from another perspective. I failed every single English test at that school in Bandung. Like, I just kept failing the tests because the English tests in the Indonesian school were a lot about grammar. Like, is this a subjunctive verb? I'd never heard the word subjunctive in my life until I got to Bandung, Indonesia. So, to suddenly someone who'd done pretty well academically to be in that situation, again, it was very humbling, eye-opening, and just starts to pry your brain open to different experience, different lived experience. And I kept doing Indonesian through school and university, but in parallel, I had sort of developed this love for the law early on, and particularly social justice. Did my Year 10 work experience at the Magi's Court in Geelong. One of the books that just really resonated with me at a pretty young age was Jeffrey Robertson's Crimes Against Humanity. From about Year 10, I always wanted to go and do law, become a human rights lawyer. I was very certain that I would go and work at the International Criminal Court or work with the UN. That was sort of the path that I had in mind when I went to university. And I only ever wanted to do arts law so I could keep doing Indonesian and law and keep that as part of my studies. So the best thing about studying at Monash, and it's the same at Melbourne University and Deakin and other universities, is if you're a student who's interested in Asia, there are so many opportunities to go on exchange and actually go over to these countries. I think I went to Indonesia about 4 times during university, and it was always paid for by the university or a scholarship. It was never, it didn't break the bank to actually be able to go and live the language on multiple exchanges. But I don't know, I was just a little bit unlucky that was around the time of one of the big exchanges I did to Indonesia was just after September 11. So it was a really challenging time to be going over and studying in another country, and universities were very concerned about their insurance policies, as I discovered. And then I was halfway through a year of exchange at Gadjah Mada University in Jogja when the Bali bombings happened. And I still remember getting that call from my mum at 5 o'clock in the morning saying, "Are you okay?" And me saying to her, "Map, Bali, Jogja, I'm fine." But I think that was my first big reflection about how little Australia understands about Indonesia. And that's probably the first time I started thinking about my career beyond law, and starting to think about how I might make a contribution to public understanding, education, sort of lifting the level of knowledge between Australia and some of our nearest neighbours, because it was just so apparent in the weeks after the Bali bombing just how little Australia understood about this big country right on our doorstep. This idea that Indonesia was somehow some, terrorist hotbed or had a particularly conservative type of Islam. They didn't even understand it was a democracy. And this is all post-Suharto. So I remember doing a radio interview with Jeff Kennett, who'd become a radio DJ after he stopped being Premier of Victoria, and having this debate with him about, the real Indonesia. And that was a real lesson for me, because one of the things that the university was continually telling me was, you have to come back, it's not safe there. Because I'd learned the Indonesian language, I was living in a share house with a bunch of other uni students from Indonesia, I couldn't have felt safer. I knew my neighbourhood, I knew all the people around me. In fact, I knew my neighbours there. I wouldn't have known any of my neighbours back in my share house in Australia. And the very next day, there was actually a shooting at the building that I would have been studying at on campus at Monash University, literally on the floor where I would have been studying had I followed the university instructions and come back to class. So it took every ounce of my being and humility not to write to the university and say, so I'll be safer there, will I? The lesson there was more one of complexity and how little control we have over what's going on around us. But again, the effort it took to convince the university that I was safe, I was secure, I was well looked after. So I was really lucky during that experience to do a semester working with an amazing Indonesian sort of academic activist, a guy called Dr. Mansur Faki, who's since passed away, but he was sort of one of the leading human rights advocates in Indonesia. So even after I came back to Australia, I stayed in touch with him and ended up doing my honours thesis as part of my double degree around the impact of foreign donor dependence on Indonesian human rights NGOs. So continued that thread through, decided I didn't want to be an academic. I've thought about it since, but so it was time to go and get a real job. So I'd done all this study, I'd done all this travel, and in doing all that, I worked up a huge debt. So I had not just my HECS debt, but the year after university, I travelled the world for a year. And unlike most people my age, I didn't pull beers. I didn't work. I just travelled and used my parents' overdraft account, speaking of privilege, but at bank interest line rates, just to be clear. So I spent 6 months in South America and backpacked around. So by the time I got back, I had to readjust my aspirations because I was very poor and very in debt. And so jumping straight into, working with human rights NGO or working at a sort of a legal clinic or social enterprise, that kind of thing, just it wasn't financially an option for me there. And I think that's really unfortunate. I think that's a whole systemic and structural issue we could spend a whole hour talking about. But I felt at that point I had no choice but to get as well paid a job as I could with the qualifications that I had. So for better or worse, I applied for articles at every single law firm in Australia that had an office in Jakarta. So I figured I'll keep that thread going, and also it will hopefully be a competitive advantage in an interview if I can talk about my experience that I still, unfortunately, is quite unique for people coming out with a law degree. Anyway, I got a lot of offers and ended up going with Freehills, so which had an office, Samadhi Praja and Tahir, in Jakarta. And so before I'd even started formally at Freehills, one of their lawyers hadn't taken leave for a long time. I don't think this would happen now. It wasn't that long ago, but they basically said, hey, Joel, I think I was in Argentina at the time. Any chance you could come home via Jakarta? I know you haven't officially started yet, but we just need someone to basically hold the fort for 3 weeks until this senior associate gets back. Don't worry, there's a partner there. You're really just going to be helping him out, because you speak the local language. So anyway, I ended up starting for Freehills at their associate firm, completely unqualified, working out of this guy's office in Jakarta, like living my best life. It was pretty amazing, actually, as a young, not even yet lawyer. But it did cement for me exactly what I'd hoped. And I know not everyone has this experience, that it did turn out that my Indonesian was a point of difference. It was a unique asset to at least some people in that firm who really valued it. And I was really, really lucky when I started in the Melbourne office that I had a number of senior partners in the firm, one of whom had worked in Indonesia for a long time, and so saw value in what I had. But I guess that's a big piece of advice for those who are starting out in your career is there is a lot of luck involved in finding mentors and people who will shepherd you through, who see the value in you that you see in yourself. And there's a bit of luck to that, but it also is just the importance of, I hazard to use the word networking, but that, every 20th person might see the value that you bring to the table. So statistically, you're going to have to talk to 20 people to find them. So just purely from a mathematical perspective, you can lift the odds of finding people that see the best in you and see your potential. And I was really lucky to have a lot of those people. So sort of fast forward, even when I got to Freehills, I think in hindsight, the partners probably regretted the decision, because I was good at what I did, and what I did was contracts, PPPs, infrastructure law. But pretty much in week one, I tracked down the pro bono partner, John Emerson, and got to work with him on a lot of really amazing pro bono cases, in addition to the billable work. And then at the end of my first year, one of the partners sent me over to Philippines to do some work. I did some work in Singapore and back in Indonesia, again, because there just weren't many junior lawyers around who not so much spoke the language, but were completely comfortable operating in another country, across cultures, to be able to just do the work, build the relationships without it feeling like this big, change or crisis or upheaval. But at the end of my first year, I went to I think it was an LIV Law Institute lecture from Julian McMahon, and he and Lex Lasry had just come off the Van Nguyen death penalty case in Singapore. And so Julian was talking about that case and how the family of Myuran Sukumaran had been in contact and asked if he and Lex would take on their son's case in Indonesia. I still to this day do not know how Julian and Lex were able to pick themselves up off the Van Nguyen case and somehow go back for round two, given I don't think either of them had ever set foot in Indonesia at that point. So at the end of the lecture, Julian said, does anyone speak Indonesian? If so, come up at the end and let's have a chat. So I was the only person who came up and said, I do, what do you need? And he said, we have to go over to Indonesia in 2 weeks and start interviewing local law firms. So we've got counsel on the ground. Can you come with us? I was like, called up John Emerson, the provo partner. I said, look, I know Freehills doesn't normally do death penalty work, but what do you reckon? He was extremely supportive, and so were some of the partners at the firm, even though I have no doubt there was probably some discussions that had to happen around the partnership. 2 weeks later, I was on the plane with Lex and Julian, and 10 years worked on that case with them and the legal team that grew over time. Multiple attempts to overturn their penalty, multiple failures, even had the opportunity to sit in the Constitutional Court and take a case all the way to the Indonesian Constitutional Court to overturn the death penalty itself, and came very close. It came down to one judge. That's how close we were. So heartbreaking, inspiring, had the opportunity to meet Myuran and Andrew and become really, really close to them both. Myuran was born 3 months after me, so very close in age, and saw through him, what could be if, like him, he has an amazing family, by the way, but to be frank, my unqualified psychological assessment of Myuran is dark-skinned kid growing up, subjected to a lot of racism, not confidence took a battering. And so when someone stepped into a bar and offered him an opportunity to hang with some cool people, make a bit of cash, I genuinely think 99 out of 100 kids would have done what he did. So the lessons for me through that case were twofold. One, I think we're too quick to judge, and I think our legal system is too quick to judge, and I think our punitive penal system is not fit for purpose in modern society. And the second lesson was we nailed those cases. My view to this day is we won every one of those cases, and particularly the Constitutional Court case at law. But we lost the politics. We lost the tactics, the strategy, and didn't do enough to engage with the Indonesian people. And so the result was only ever going to go one way, no matter how erudite the legal arguments. And that's when I quit the law. So I have huge respect for lawyers. Most of my friends are still lawyers, but the reason I made that career shift midway is because I wanted to get in the ground floor with politicians, with policy, and actually try to build the policy that the law can then interpret, rather than doing it one case at a time. And I've been a public servant now for what feels like forever. And I've been through multiple roles. I've worked federal government, state government. I've been a trade commissioner. I've worked in the Premier's department. I'm now working in the jobs department. And I haven't regretted it for a second. I've really had the opportunity to be involved in a lot of policy making that I think has made, one person's life or a community's life or the life of Victorians better. And the bits of my public service career that I've loved the most is the bits that have supported that Asia engagement, building diversity. The 5 years that I worked in the education department, my whole job was supporting international students at a school level, actually become part of school communities, supporting Victorian students to engage with the world. And one of my proudest moments as the head of international education was building this program called the Young Leaders Program to Indonesia, China, and India, which took Year 9 students to, for example, Indonesia, to go to local school and live with a host family and have exactly the same opportunity that I had as a 15-year-old, but able to provide that opportunity to many, many, many Victorians who will hopefully go on to have that same kind of seminal moment in their lives, understand the countries that have hosted them in a really, really deep way. And hopefully they'll go on to be politicians, engineers, whatever, but take with them a much deeper understanding of our region than the majority of people who make decisions at the moment at every level. And I've tried to stay involved as much as I can, whether it's through advisory boards or going and speaking to schools about the importance of learning other languages and learning about other cultures in a really deep and meaningful way. So I guess to tie it all back, I think there's probably been two threads to my career. One is doing what I love and what I feel is meaningful. And that's what's sort of led me to jump around through different professions, but each time I've taken up a new role, it's because I've seen the opportunity to do something with purpose. And the second, that theme that's run through everything has been that opportunity as a 15-year-old to go and live in Bandung, to change the way that I saw the world and my place in it, and then living in a society that is very, very slowly starting to value that, you know, whether it's businesses or Victorian government departments. And as a result, I think, been really fortunate. I'm still not that old, so it's a weird sentence, but I've to date feel like I've been able to lead a really fun life and a rich life and a multifaceted life, but far, far from linear. So I'll finish where I started, which is the importance of diversity and really having a lived experience that you can bring to problem solving or your work or your life that looks at it from different angles. We are absolutely part of Asia, and I think we've got a long way to go to really embrace that. And anyone who still has even if you've already started a law degree, if you've got the opportunity to add on a language, I would strongly advocate for it, because it will be hugely valuable to you in your career, no less your own life. So that's the sum total of my meandering career to date. And for those who are in the room, happy to dig into any of that or take any questions. Over to you.
Thank you. Thank you so much. You know, I went for a job interview once and they said to me, so when are you going to decide what you want to do with your life? I said, I have. which meant that I didn't get the job because, of course, they clearly, I didn't take them along with me. You know, are you going to be a Chinese lawyer or are you going to be a Chinese law academic, which they thought as two completely different things and I saw as entirely the same thing. But anyway, it's really fabulous. Thank you so much. Now, any questions, comments? Yes, please.
Yeah, I do. So you made, I think in your introduction, like you stated like 3 points first before you started like elaborating with the story. So I think one of the point was like Australia is very much like part of Asia. But I think you also allude to like some of this of like we are closer to Asia, but I feel like we say that Asia is important, but our policy and our action from a federal level is more aligned to our Anglo partners, which is like British or the UK or America. So like now that you're in the policy business, what amendment or introduction in the policy level would you introduce for us to be more aligned to our Asia partners' interests? So
I don't know how well the microphone picks this up. So for anyone looking at this post facto, the question was, and I'm paraphrasing, so apologies if I miss this, but technically Australia is on the map, the global map in the Asian region. But a lot of our geopolitical alignment is more towards the Anglosphere, particularly the UK and the US. So what can and should we do differently to engage at a deeper level with Asia? And I think the addition to that is, now that I'm in policy, what would I do? So first thing is, I'm in policy doesn't mean I dictate policy. That's up to the government. And also, I think historically a lot of the policy around geopolitical engagement takes place at a federal level. I'm currently working in state government, but, and it's a really big but, or maybe it's an and, having worked in federal and state government, having worked in public and private sector, my view is, and the death penalty example is a good one, it's almost impossible for a government to set a new course or a policy direction from scratch if it requires us to work in a relationship with a different country or a different culture. You can't do it without ballast. So unless you've built up over many years those people-to-people relationships, those diplomatic relationships, business to business, it's very hard for particularly a federal government to come in and suddenly say, okay, tomorrow we're going to lift our engagement with Indonesia. If in the preceding 20 years they haven't supported Indonesian language learning or supported more Australian companies to invest in Indonesia and vice versa. And actually that all happens more at a state level. So I think if you get a 2-minute soundbite on the on a podcast, you would think that international relations happens federal government to federal government. For me, I see that as a cherry on top. So working in state government, there's a whole lot of things that we can do and we are doing to build that ballast. And one of the obvious ones is education. Language learning in this country is in a terrible state. But in Victoria, it's better than most. Language learning levels are well below where they need to be, but the number of Victorian students learning a language, the number of Victorian schools with a sister school, particularly in Asia, numbers of international students from Asia studying in Victorian schools and universities, at least pre-COVID, much higher in Victoria. So I think in Victoria, we're doing a lot of the right things to build that ballast. But I think one of the things that we really need to do is, to your point, walk the talk. Not just say Asia is important, but actually do things that show that it's important. So I think on first impressions, I think the new foreign minister is doing a lot of good things in terms of actually not just visiting a lot of countries in our neighbourhood, but actually listening to people who have engaged with the region for a long time. I was really excited to see a meeting last week between the parliamentary secretary who works to Foreign Minister Wong, Tim Watts, had a roundtable with a whole lot of people about the importance of Asia literacy. And having spent a career in this space, like I almost cried tears of joy when I looked at the screen and saw all the faces on the screen, and all these people who have been working in this space and advocating in this space for a really long time. So long answer to the question is, I think there's a lot that government can do, but I think they need to look at it from every angle. How do we build business to business relationships? How do we build more research collaboration between universities, private sector and counterparts overseas? How do we get more people studying an Asian language? But that bit about collaboration, I think, is really crucial, because whether it's climate change or hybrid working or any of these big new cross-border challenges, we can't solve them in Australia alone. Like, they're going to need multidisciplinary teams made up of people from different countries tackling them. There's actually an imperative for us to work more closely and collaboratively with people in that region. I guess it doesn't matter what sector you're in. If you're a business, university, or pretty much a public servant in any department, there's a leadership role for you to play in building that ballast. Now, the other thing I talked about earlier is multiculturalism. I think the other thing we can do domestically is without it sounding too utilitarian, make far better use of our expertise in-house. We've got, sort of out there, we've got people who were born in these countries, or they've got parents who were born there, they speak the language fluently before they even start school. Unless we start getting more of those people with a diversity of perspectives into decision-making roles, I think we're doing ourselves a disservice as a country and a community, because I think there's a huge amount of expertise there. But unless that expertise is at the table making the decisions, then it's not being utilised. And that you can run an economic argument for that, but you can run a social argument too about a community that's more inclusive needs to be one that actually values expertise. And if you look at who's in senior leadership roles in universities, in the public service, in ASX 500 companies, and look at those faces, they are not representative of our community, and they're definitely not representative of our region. So there's a lot of things that we can do in that space, empowering people from diverse backgrounds before you even get to free trade agreements or some of those high-powered geopolitical partnerships.
Thanks for that.
Any more questions? I can see a little smile. Tell us, what are you thinking?
No, it's just a very technical question. How do you pick up so many languages easily?
Well, that was completely overstated. So where I went to school, we had to study Indonesian and German for the first few years, and then you had to pick one. So that was the bit of German, and then I had an ex-girlfriend who lived in Switzerland, and so Schweizerdeutsch they speak in the south of that country. Italian I learned all through primary school. It's funny how many schools in Victoria in particular, not so much these days, but like every second school used to teach Italian. So I got 6 years of Italian, enough that when I went and lived, so I lived in Italy for 6 months. Again, Monash University, they've got a Prato campus. So I got a whole semester living in Prato, ordering all my meals in Italian. I lived in South America for about 8 months. But the first 3 months I lived in Buenos Aires with a host family because it worked for me in Indonesia, and went to Spanish school half a day every day, 5 days a week for 3 months. And then Arabic I picked up a bit of and did, I just was doing lessons myself at one of the language centres in East Melbourne, because my wife and I really wanted to go to the Middle East, and I hate going to languages. I hate going to countries where I can't speak any of the language. I feel very ignorant. So I did about 2 years of Arabic, and then we went to Jordan and Syria before the Civil War. So yeah, had the opportunity to use Arabic over there. So I wouldn't say I'm fluent in any of those languages, but it's more that I sort of did an intense period and then tried to find a way to use it, and then moved on to the next one. But yeah, it's not like I could walk into the UN and be an interpreter. But I just love learning languages. I think it's fun, and it's wonderful seeing. I've got a 3-year-old and a 6-year-old, and I'm just I love being a dad, but I can't wait to show them the world. And my 6-year-old's just started prep this year, and he's learning Mandarin, and he loves it. Like just comes home with new words, and I love seeing in him what I've had, this real passion for not just the language as a kind of almost mathematical tool, but the people and the culture that sit behind it.
There you go. Do you feel heartened? Very much. Yes.
Joel, how does your Asia background, experience and expertise inform what you do with your work today?
It's a good question. So very much so. Just before taking up this role, I was the regional director for Inner Metropolitan Melbourne in the same department. And it was one of the reasons I got that role and took that role is if you think about the central city economy in particular in Melbourne, we're not WA, we don't have a resource-based economy, we've got a services economy. So some of our biggest generators of wealth for this state, international education, services, tourism. So having an understanding of our region was really important to that role. now that that role's expanded to all of metropolitan Melbourne, the tourism and international education piece is still really important, but I'd probably add into that the multiculturalism and cultural diversity, and part of my role, like it's not my job to shape the future of Melbourne. I mean, no one person could do that even if they wanted to, but my role is trying to create forums and mechanisms to work with and listen to different bits of the community to co-design the future of our city with government. And given the multiculturalism of our city and the point I made before about how hard it is for that diversity of voices to get a seat at the table, I think part of what I bring to this role from that background is a real passion and motivation to create opportunities for a greater diversity of voices, and not always the loud voices, to be able to contribute to a vision for our city. Yeah, I also think on the back of COVID and Zoom, and it's sort of going to break down some of the distance barriers. So whether we're looking at companies setting up here or joint ventures, particularly in the tech space, if we can do it better, I think we're going to see more opportunities for collaboration in that space between some really smart Melburnians and counterparts in Jakarta or Manila or Singapore. And I think government's role is to try and facilitate that where we can.
Now, I see you sitting there nice and quietly in the back row with a big mask on. Did you want to ask a question? Did you have a thought or something you wanted to say? No? No, I'm not forcing you. I'm not forcing you.
I have one more question if you don't mind. So like I think you also alluded to like how much like lucky you are like throughout your talk. So I was wondering, I have this thought, like I think people who are lucky are not just lucky by accident. I think like they actually sought opportunities, and then like whatever they saw as opportunity, other people see as a problem, which they don't want to come here. So I was wondering, like when you saw like opportunities like, oh, there's a scholarship to go to Indonesia, or like there's like opportunity to go to South America, it's like, what makes you think that, oh, this is an opportunity and not a problem?
Because so I do believe that that luck has a lot to do with it. To give you a concrete example, I had the space to even have 3 hours on whatever that night was to put the scholarship application together with help from my parents, because as a 15-year-old, I was in an environment where that was possible. If both my parents were working shift jobs, they might not have even been there next to me when I was putting the application together. There are a lot of more people than you would imagine who, you know, they don't even have 3 meals a day in Australia. When you're sort of fighting for nutrients, applying for a scholarship application is not necessarily going to be front of mind. So like absolutely I've jumped at a lot of opportunities, but and yes, you do have to be self-motivated, but I think the starting point is not the same for everyone, and so the ability for me to even get to the point of being motivated to take the opportunities, I think, is where the luck was, and the fortune and the privilege. But then I'm not suggesting I didn't do anything. I guess my point is more this: my starting point was different to a lot of other people's.
So do you have any advice for us to be more lucky, to be more aware of our opportunities around us?
So this is a good start.
Yeah.
I mean, just turning up to things like this, hearing different perspectives, you know, meeting other people that you might not have met before. As we come out of COVID, there'll be more and more opportunities to participate in networking activities, and the law school and the University of Melbourne do, like, there's a million things you can get involved in. That would be one thing I'd do, is just be proactive.
So thank you for that answer and for that plug in for your talk. It's in fact, you're right. The entire purpose of this is to help people to see that there isn't a single path, that there are many paths and there are many choices that can be made. That every step that you take, every opportunity, every person you meet, every opportunity you seize, and don't let go past, are things that can help you, I hope, and support. And so the whole purpose of this is precisely for that reason. So thank you so much, Joel. It's a fabulous story, and I'm glad to see that you still have a really strong passion for sort of for your that you've held since you were 15, I suppose, and it's a passion that you sustain, but also it's clear that it sustains you as well. So thank you very much indeed for sharing that with us. And so now we have to go and find our passion that sustains us, and that we sustain as well over a period. Hopefully we can make a difference in the same way. So thank you.
Thanks, Gil.